Hi, everybody. Thanks for the questions, for all those who have sent them in. Always important to have them from my point of view, of course. I wish everybody a good Thursday night. This question is from Catherine Stewart, out in British Columbia. And it is, I have a deep curiosity to somehow see or experience what I really am. I also have a deep curiosity to somehow see or experience what reality is, inside and outside of time and space. I suspect I may not be alone in this curiosity, because I often hear it reflected in the questions of others. This curiosity is a wanting to know. That's what curiosity is. It is asking for clarity. It feels like a deep movement from within, and it is very exciting to learn. Is this curiosity simply a construction of personality, or is it simultaneously something deeper that draws us to spiritual growth? Good question. My dilemma in answering this question is that we have, all of us, in our curiosity or in our wanting to know or in our hope and wish to engage with higher states or spiritual development or a state that allows us to recognize that it is there and you're there too. There's our dilemma. We come at this curiosity from a position and place that relates to an individual naturally and normally attempting to engage with something outside itself, as if, and of course, not quite outside ourselves, we would say, but it seems that way when we're engaging with it. And really, in a kind of a way, it's as if the personality itself is an isolated from an arrangement with, or an engagement with an internal self, or a soul, or a love. I'm going to try not to get involved in your second question, Catherine. So, kind of an independent self that when it asks or describes or recognizes or understands something, it's coming from a place that is capable and able to make some sense of something that it has no idea about. But what it does have is a scale of engagement. In other words, what does that mean? It has a sense of what is already being written, already being talked about, already in the personality world, in our material planes, physical, emotional, and mental, has made some sense to other people or to us. So here we are. We're trying to make sense of something that we kind of think we understand what it might be already. In fact, we really don't, because we're used to engaging with descriptions that have been attempted by others and attempted by us. There's an aspect within us, getting to the question, that is a relationship with a higher state, from my perspective. It is a level of loving or beingness that is aware of a higher aspect because it's linked to it. What we do, again, is use a kind of loving of ourselves based on imitation or resemblances of love that we believe by definition is love according to us. It allows us to do whatever we think we need to do to become an individual on these planes, and we love what we have constructed and what has been constructed within us relative to patterns related to other folk. All right. You've heard that story before. We are capable of perceiving a level of loving that still comes under the auspices of a thing we call soft, gentle loving. Still with the idea that we are the perceiver of it and we know what that is, except that we don't. But we can feel, sense, make sense of how a scenario should be if it is related to loving, as defined by us. It's a dilemma, because loving may not be that. But the feeling of it, the sensate response that we have, we can be in love with anything. And to prove that, we're in love with ourselves and how we think things should be and why they should be that way. And therefore, we assess others to be, according to us, like that. And we, without any restriction, look at what we describe and find it not wanting. And we don't realize that what we're doing is investigating and asserting at the same time, and in fact we are misperceiving often. All we are seeing in another is how they have been trained to see them as loving. We miss the fact that we are missing our perception of loving. And that loving is the use of energy or tones or frequency internalized, not vulnerable, but reactive to a sense of vulnerability, which is defined by anything that has no agreement with us. And this is really hard for us to make sense of. To discover a recognition and a realization of loving within us can virtually bring us to tears, place us in a position of not being able to perceive loving. Because if we have responses, we are not perceiving loving. We are perceiving what is affecting us. And therefore, we can be stimulated by our endocrine gland system. That is considered loving, whatever that may be. From our perspective, this is constantly how we are understanding a sense of recognition of value. In the old traditions, Christianity among them, there was something that was always known to be true. It is extremely difficult to experience a higher state because it relates to a deep sense of love for anything and everything beyond our version of what can only be loved or not loved. And our individual personality constructs cannot love everything. So it was thought that only those who are so vulnerable can experience a kind of loving. Now, so vulnerable meaning the protective coating of a style of engagement with life is blurred or almost not there. Then you can perceive something almost in a sense that comes upon you. It's a sensate relationship, very physical and very emotional. And in the mind, the emotional dialogue does not exist at that time. So then you understood a broad kind of loving sensation that is occurring, and no objective response is available. So-called objective. It's not objective at all. It's individually dialogued and assessed in a nanosecond and expressed as such to be that or that or that or that or that or that with great assurance, as if it were the total reality. This is very difficult, and there have been those who have entered into that place. From my perspective, I personally think most of the avatars that have ever come in have touched at this level, this understanding which is not understanding, this perception which is not perceived by an individual, this compassion that is not constructed by an individual, this designation of love that is not decided by an individual. But felt, perceived, recognized as if it was outside and inside that individual, as if they, in that moment, cannot remember who they are, but can engage with the recognition of such a relationship with an empty of self mode. If that can happen for a second or two, there is no curiosity in it. There is no personal view about the importance of the viewer for the validation of a recognition of such a thing. The viewer as he or she might move out of that moment can then engage with something that is cultivated by the individual called a descriptive place or a descriptive expression, which might elevate the individual. The individual then moves out of phase with any kind of understanding of what they have experienced, but moves into a phase of a development of a kind of individually described formula, which they again can believe is very important because it happens that they love the way they are doing things. This is just a normal thing here. So you can see how difficult this particular question is. It's true. Everyone does want to know. Would like to experience this. It is an experience. Until it's part of your life. But even when it's part of your life, it's phased in because the utilization of the thing that we love the most, that's our own traditional way of engaging with life, whether you see it or not, takes place back again. So if one is really serious about seeing themselves as they really are, it will make you very vulnerable. And you will understand that vulnerability. And it will be maintained. And slowly, you'll learn how to live with that, but still there will be a movement towards the value of the individual because these planes insist on having it that way. This is not negating anyone on this plane, but it is relating to something that hope presses us towards. What's hope? Don't know. A wish, an attempt, a sense of movement towards something beyond the auspices, the form that we already believe is very important and we are in love with and really don't want to see exactly what makes it up perfectly. because we basically would have a lot of difficulty handling that sight. We're also trained to judge everything. If not others, certainly it gets trained on ourselves. So the vulnerability of perceiving that which is inside and that which is really basically our personality we call outside is a slow process. Because engendering with a sense of vulnerability, there has to be an ability to handle that vulnerability. Sounds a little weird when you speak it out. But there is the illusion of thinking you can do it. And we all have pieces and parts of that illusion. It's kind of like creating aspects of your personality that values anything and everything you say. And when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about every one of us here on this plane. We are the great comforters of how we function. We value, engage, and if we understand that we can be illusory to some degree, because that helps us to value ourselves in our vulnerabilities, and we have many: physical, material, emotional, how we think. We don't like the idea of not figuring everything out. It's too difficult for us. But maybe if you're lucky and have already figured seriously true stuff that you believed before, and now you begin to realize it wasn't as true as you came up with, maybe you could inspire yourself to consider the possibility that there is a possibility that we're not always right. Oh, that's easy to say. We'll just throw that. It's a toss-up. We're not always right, but we don't believe that we're wrong in a place where you know you're right. There's no vulnerability in that, one could say. But here's what I would say. There is vulnerability in that because you increase the intensity to prove you must be right. You increase the judgment, increase the push that you have to stiffen up and create a barrier to protect what you speak of. We all do this to some degree. Seeing that is uncomfortable. And that may be true, but not in this case, or that case, or this case, or that case, or this case, because the other person's not perfect either. And other people are not perfect. Never mind person. It's a very interesting thing. I've always known that experience is the one thing that would be helpful to all of us. The dilemma is that there is all kinds of different experiences. And as soon as you have one, you become really able because you had one. You can see what we're up against. So going slow in relationship to this is one thing. But it is counterproductive according to our personalizations. Our belief system is quite pleased with itself if it thinks it has an answer. However, if you consider having an answer that you think might be valuable, realize it's just a stepping stone to the next experience. If you can do that and still be okay with thinking you're growing spiritually, then you've got a pretty good chance of understanding something. And that is the understanding of vulnerability. Vulnerability is not being down and out. Vulnerability is just understanding that there isn't always an answer that you can come up with that is perfectly true all the time. I find that very fascinating because since we are where we are in our relationship with how we function here on these planes, and just take a look around in the world, when you look at that, you say, okay, we're still in a process of development. But the belief that personalized development, according to an individual who is doing it and in charge of it, is not necessarily a relationship with spiritual growth. However, if you take a look at metaphysical backgrounds, you can also look at being able to do something, being able to fly, being able to move into another state and be able to stay in that particular position forever, is recognized in our world as something special. Also, being able to engage in a manner on a personal level where you can do something better than somebody else. From your point of view, of course, or from an experiential point of view. That's pretty special in our world, too. Our focus is on proving something. And we're heading in that direction so that we can head in another direction, perhaps. There is an end point in how important you are. You die. It started when you were born, before you were born, but mainly after you were born. And here you go. Get to a certain point where the ultimate vulnerability begins to occur. But that is not a relationship with higher states. It's just a relationship with life and how it is here on these planes. Inner engagement with higher states is an experience, not a feature of a goal that relates to a personalized version of the personality. This is what makes it so difficult. And we can say all we want about wanting to do that, and we can attempt to do that by harmlessness, by meditation, by focusing on that which we believe is a higher state. We have all these avatars who have come, very interesting people who have engaged with these planes, pulled energy into these planes from higher states and anchored them here so that our species can be filled a little bit more with love. So what happens then? Good question. More of how they love themselves gets shown. So we have some dilemmas to overcome as a species. Loving yourself as the most important person in the world increases that material plane emphasis. We all have had that experience. Attempting to understand that is not what we want to see in ourselves. We would prefer not to. Others, yeah, sure, you can see it, but we wouldn't do that. Well, we do. So, with a little bit of a sense of humor, you can pick out those times. Although those times are not always humorous, but they're there. And understanding that begins to help us a little bit if we are willing to be okay with understanding ourselves. We're not always willing. We do, though, protect ourselves without knowing that we are protecting the style of engagement that we have inherited and or created ourselves and been a part of. This is, in our world, kind of a necessity because we do that as an act of love for our parental guidance, often, whatever your parent may be, whoever they may be. We all do this. Recognizing that we do it and beginning to understand that that may not be as helpful in the definition of the love that you are truly curious about. But it doesn't stop us from doing it unless we begin to experience another aspect of that loving, which hasn't got anything to do with us as a personality on this material plane. Because we are perceivers and actors, engagers, evaluating and functioning as a summation of what we think we need to be valuable in this world. This is hard for us to take in. But if you can allow yourself to see you doing this, you will feel awkward, uncomfortable, vulnerable, just like a little kid that walks into our plane. And it will shift its focus of wanting to learn to a different level, idealistically, but not necessarily very quickly, because it's already idealized its own personalized version of how to engage in this world. There is one little trick, among many, I guess. Find the things you can't do well and recognize them. Keep them in your back pocket. And every time when you're showing or issuing an engagement with value and importance, you can tell the intensity will increase. You will be always in alignment with that. Remember what you can't do well, and it'll make you laugh. Pick something funny. Pick something maybe that you don't find funny. Remember it. It doesn't put everything askew. It just helps you to remember that it's okay to be vulnerable. And this is not always easy for us. But you can ask yourself questions. One of them, am I the most important person in the world? Other people have that name, and they put it on like a badge. But you could do that in a smaller area and then start laughing, because it's not real. You just think it is. All of us have been involved with this and will be again. Don't miss it to the best of your ability. That level of honesty inside will help you to move towards experiencing a flow of loving coming in your direction for you, despite your inability, but likely because of it, because of the recognition of it. The doing of it, what does that matter? Well, for some, it matters a lot. It doesn't. Not as much as we believe. But you need, I agree, you certainly need to be, let's say, pickups, making us feel decent and reasonable people. Because, by the way, we are. In spite of your frailty, my frailty, everyone's frailty. But we need that comfort in a kind of a way. There's one seems to be individualized and often idealized. The other is within an engagement with a state that is wondrous. And we have no control over that. But it is within us for a purpose that can be helpful to us in recognizing more of how we are as an individual personality. It's an energy combination of stuff. Just responses, belief systems, and we try to make sense of that up to a point where we create a style, and then we We engage with that style unknowingly, and we don't want to let it go. And then in that style, now we greet the world in a way that seems reasonable to do. Unconsciously, unrecognized, for fear of recognizing how we are in a given moment for a purpose that relates to our vulnerability and its protection. Everyone is vulnerable. See how you protect that. I agree. Curiosity in that level is very, very difficult. It's okay to think you are, because that helps us, moves us a little bit. I always had this nervousness about growing, especially in the early days, meaning my early days, which are still with me. And if you find something that is most loving inside, why would you ever want to be how you were before? That's an interesting question. Whatever that was, because that was okay before too. But now, why would you want to leave that place? And how real is that place? If it is just the beginning of something, and your personality thinks it's an end point of something, because it doesn't know. It believes it does, but it's a belief. And it's something that is claimed to make you feel relatively valuable. You're valuable before that. Just think of one individual in a world who engages with a deeper state, being really nervous about it. Now, of course, there'll be some who'll say, "Oh, I'm not nervous about that. I could do that." Anything that makes you different than what you already think you are will make you nervous. Whether you allow that to be noticed or not, it's still there. And then I always thought, why would anyone want to leave it, that place, by saying anything, by being around anybody that would change that, just by saying hello? So you have to then talk and say hello. I would not talk. One could say. No, it's not like that. Any experience that you might have might help you, but it might help those that others similar to you cannot allow to occur. I know I've said this before. I can't say it enough. Individuals say, what can I do in this world? Because most of it I can't do anything about. And that's true. But you can do you differently and with respect to others, including respect to you, knowing full well you're not going to get this perfect, although your personality might say you can. Because it's not like that. Not because you can't. Ultimately, growing increases within so that more can come in. And fundamentally, your personality needs time to be able to handle not being exactly how you were before. But every now and then, the personality will remind you, remember this? You did this before. And that was helpful. It's just the stuff that we're made of. Really, you still love it. Well, I won't love it anymore. Too bad. Don't throw away the best friend you ever had, and probably the only one that actually knows you. And then you have that aspect of you that is trying to figure out what that is about. And if you do figure it out, you'll try to hide it the best you can. But you can't, because you already saw it. But you can lengthen the period of time where you have to acknowledge it. Be okay with that. But try not to hurt anybody else. Because you're angry, because you're noticing something within yourself. This is for all of us. This is what we do. Sorry, Catherine, I'm making this not an individual thing. I'm making it a whole general thing, which I often do with my questions. So, but this is about us all. This is at the core of our relationship with the hope to do things. I remember a person telling me years ago, back in the 70s, and they said, well, I figured it all out. I said, because I was that kind of a personality at the time. What kind of a belief system have you come up with? And they said, well, this is how it is. And they told me how it was. I said, wow, that sounds interesting. It's not my bag, but that sounds really interesting. So can I ask you a question? How long are you going to believe this? Once again, I should have kept quiet, but I didn't. And I learned how to keep quiet later on. I'm still learning how to keep quiet from time to time. But when there's honesty involved, from the point of view of a personality, there's also illusion involved from the point of a personality, because a personality cannot encapsulate everything perfectly. It's not made up that way. It can only encapsulate relative to its training and what it thinks it knows. And one look across the world, and you will find that many personalities think they know everything. And if they don't, they make it up. I think this is what happens in our world. It's not a bad thing, good thing. This is the nature of how we protect ourselves in an evaluation of circumstance, of environment. If you're very competitive, you have to win something. So in that process, try not to hurt very many people best you can. That will be helpful. One could say you're only hurting yourself, but what you're really doing is constructing a system and emphasizing it so that you feel more comfortable inside for yourself. And you've done that throughout your life in various different ways. And so this seems to be a feature of what some personality orientations are keen to do. I said some. I could easily say all of us in our own way. But if you look at it from a constructive point of view, and I think this is really important, we have this other feature that lies within us, where we can begin to learn how to watch us in action, little by little, please, little by little, and not necessarily agree with everything that we see within ourselves. It's not so bad when we're watching other people. We can do that pretty well, because we're trained to do this. Our parental background automatically did it in their fashion. Not perfect, just their fashion. But it doesn't make them terrible. They've done the same thing in their past, in their attempt to ward off the vulnerability that they feel about not being important and valuable, whatever that may be. Or in their version, if they have one, of beating up on themselves, judging on themselves. Their method may be to beat up on other people. In our world, usually verbally. Because it's the nature of that. If you can't beat up on yourself, beat up on somebody else. Be important for that. I think we can go beyond that. Although, I also think we are vulnerable unto ourselves as well, especially as you gain access to awareness around yourself. Don't make it a dialogue. Make it an understanding. I think I'm understanding why I might do that. I still like to do it. Well, all right. Then know that that's what you do. And don't blame others for it. You will see others through your own eyes. Others may do it too. In their way, by the way, which is not a perfect way. I used to think that we thought that our way was always more perfect than other people's. I don't think that's always true. I think often there's reflexive responses that get away on us. And it's out of our mouth before we can stop it. I'm not a great believer in not apologizing. You're apologizing to yourself most of the time. So do that. If you make it out loud, it just helps the other person to think that you're actually thinking of them. Because you just hurt them with your intensity around being vulnerable enough. Unknown to you, you may have hurt yourself. But you might blame other people for making it part of you too. It's not their fault. All of us have reflex reactions to our environment. Recognize it. Do the best you can with it. Be respectful of yourself and try to be respectful of others. They're just trying to be comforted by how they function, as you are trying to be comforted by how you function. I think it's time for us to... I didn't intend to spend all that time on that one question, but thank you very much, Catherine, for that question. And next time we'll try another. I wish you all well in your spiritual growth. Please be okay with the tidbits, with the feelings, with the experience that you have. That, in your quiet time, can be helpful to others. And now we're just going to meditate for about an hour, roughly an hour. And I'll bring you out at the end. Please take care of yourselves. Good night. Sorry, everybody, our music is not working, so you can try to turn your own on if you'd like. Our voice transmits, but the music is not. Have a good meditation. And now we'll just do the balancing and the grounding. And have a good evening, everybody.